anyone that is starting out, if you have a good idea, people do like to talk and people like to talk about themselves. And guess what? We're all an expert in ourselves. So if you're asking somebody to tell a life story, if you're asking for them to talk about their business, whatever it may be, they're an expert in that field.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
Hey, podcaster, it's your host, Adam Adams, and I'm joined with Nikki Corbett today on the podcast. We're going to be talking about a few things. So you're going to learn a few things on this episode. We're probably going to talk a little bit about branding and messaging so you can get in front of the right person. We're probably going to be talking about taking care of yourself so you can take care of your business a little bit. And we'll also talk a little bit about entrepreneurship and how you become more successful as a business owner. You are a business owner. You might be a startup business. Nikki works with people like you. She consults and supports people that are new into the business, that are launching their company. So if you're launching a company, you might also want to check out her podcast, which is linked down in the show notes. Also, her bio is down in the show notes. So just go and find Round 2 podcast. Scroll down, you'll find it. You'll be able to click, connect with her, and you're going to get a lot of content off of that podcast. I was just listening to one about franchising and this guy who bought a cookie store from this one guy and then decided to franchise it. And I learned a ton of cool things and it got my ideas firing. And if you want your ideas firing, you can go and check out Round 2 podcast. That link's in the show notes. Nikki, it's good to have you. I'm going to jump in with a couple of questions.
Go for it.
The first one is going to be strange, maybe for some people, because they're going to be like, why are we talking about this on the podcast about podcasting? But I remembered when I read your bio, which is down in the show notes, you mentioned something about like you're a fitness fiend or you love fitness. And I wonder, how does that translate into other things that you do?
Oh gosh. So I think that our family kind of lives by the motto of move it or lose it. And that just has been really ingrained into me my whole life. And what I mean by that, I certainly don't mean, oh my God, you have to be like a marathon runner or a bodybuilder. It's more of just like using your body, taking care of your body. What's Newton's law? Body in motion stays in motion. So being healthy has just been always at the core of our family and how we live our lives. So as I've gotten older, I've wanted to take care of my body better. I think as we all get older, we realize we're not invincible and like we are in our 20s. And so we want to just do better for ourselves. So I have tried really hard to figure out what works best for me at this phase of my life and how does it translate into other aspects of my life. So for me, number one, I think walking is like the most underrated form of exercise. And if anybody can take anything, is just literally take yourself for a 30-minute walk every day. And you'll be surprised at how quickly 30 minutes can easily turn into an hour, how refreshed you will feel, how you're able to work through problems, come up with new ideas. I find whenever I'm stuck, I'm always like, okay, I better just go walk it out and I'll figure something out. I bring my phone with me to listen to music or podcasts, but I also do it because I have my notes app so I can just jot things down that I don't want to forget, or if I have a solution or an idea, because if I don't jot it down, I'll get back and be like, what was I thinking about? So I just think that with fitness, there's also a level of discipline, a level of consistency that comes along with it. And I think that those are things that are really transferable into other aspects of life.
Yeah, like your business.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how would you say that this walking or the fitness part benefits you either in podcasting or in your consulting company?
I think let's talk about podcasting just because that is also something that I've been very consistent with. But it also is a lot of work. It just doesn't happen. You record these episodes with all of your different guests. You have to go through and edit them. You have an intro. You want to make sure you have an outro. You want it to sound good. You want it to look good. Then you have to get it uploaded into all the different platforms. And granted, there's a lot of tools that make those things easier, but it still is work like that nobody is watching you do. You're just doing it because you want to put out this conversation and this value, hopefully, that other people are seeing and listening while they're consuming it. So I think the consistency there and just having something in life that I'm consistent at has made it easier to be consistent in other aspects and having that discipline to keep driving forward and getting up and doing it.
Nikki, have you read the book called, oh my gosh, Compound Effect, Darren Hardy.
Oh, no, I haven't. But I think about compound effects from like investments quite often.
I like that book. Just has some things that are really resonating with exactly what you're saying. In a way, it's like you mentioned how with your podcast, you do all this back end work. Not everybody sees.
Right.
And same thing like the gym. We see your health, your fitness, your energy right now today. We feel it in your voice with this episode. We can tell that's important to you. Your podcast is growing and you're staying consistent on it and you're getting clients. These types of things, it comes out of this book with Darren Hardy, Compound Effect, where we as people like need to basically figure out how to make a small tweak and try to do it for a long time.
Yeah.
And let's just say for a visual effect, the person who's really overweight and not feeling good makes these two little changes, maybe one to the diet, maybe one to just walking 30 minutes a day, like you said.
Totally.
And you don't see it tomorrow. You might not even see it next week. And for some people who are starting a podcast or starting a business or starting to get healthy or whatever it is, they can get frustrated. They might feel like stressed because they're doing these things and it's already been 2 weeks and they don't have $1 million or they don't have 1 million followers or they haven't lost 1 million pounds. And you mentioned it more to where I felt you noticing that it's a long game. Whatever we're doing, like your whole family with fitness, you and your podcast, it is something that we put in the work and we continue to put in the work and we feel better because we put in the work and the results happen but they happen over time.
Totally. I think the thing is that we're in this world where you can go on Amazon right now and you could get something delivered tonight, right? We have this like instant gratification environment that is so in our faces all the time, even with anything like, oh, you can buy this, it'll be there today. You can do this tomorrow. You can go to the airport and hop on an airplane tonight if you want to. You can do all these things for your instant gratification. But something like physical fitness, sure, I would love it if you could build muscle overnight that was visible to somebody else, but you can't.
Or you can pay for it too.
Yeah, right? It would be wonderful. Like I would love that. And I would love it if I could start a podcast today and by next week it had gone viral and I had all of these followers and all of these listeners. It's like anything in life, you have to put in the work in order to see the results. And if you work hard enough and don't give up, you can have whatever you want.
Yeah. There's two pieces to your podcast that I think the listener will grow from. And so I want to transfer our time over to these.
Sure.
First and foremost, you started your podcast more than a year ago, right?
Correct. I started my podcast in September of 2022.
And you went active, you went weekly for how many weeks?
It was probably about 15 to 17, and it was audio only when I started.
Okay. And then what happened?
So it was actually an idea that I had probably starting in 2017 or 2018. And the reason that I called it round two is because I had been going through a divorce at the time. And I started thinking a lot about marriage and how I would say, probably safe to say 99% of us, if you get married, you're getting married with positive intentions, right? You're not thinking, oh, I'll do this for 5 years and then I'll get divorced and go do something else. Most of us have good intentions. And so what I learned from going through that process is even though I was the one that initiated it, it was still very sad. And it was one of those things where I still had to look in the mirror and go, okay, like now my life is on a completely different track than it was. And so I thought round two popped in my head. And so then I started thinking about all these other people that I knew in my life who had like major life shifts, major pivots, some intentional, some unintentional, and that they were marching along a road and then all of a sudden now they're on this road. And I thought that would be so cool to tell those stories because you think about even since then, podcasting has blown up so much, right? There's like almost 4 million podcasts in the world now. And a lot of time interview types were very focused on like the success story or I came from nothing and then I worked hard and I got here or I had this tragic thing happen when I was a kid and now I'm this uber successful person. And it's great when you're hearing it from a celebrity perspective, but it's also, that's not everyday people. And so I was just thinking, and I just started jotting down all of these people that I knew in my life who had these major life changes. So that was what the first season's stories were all about, were those folks that had these round two moments. So then, yeah, like I mentioned, I stopped being consistent at the beginning of 2023. I did a few episodes in the summer of 2023. Then I had some other personal life changes myself, other round twos, if you will. And I just wrote out the rest of 2023 with different focus areas. So then when this year came back, I had gone into business for myself. And I really love podcasting. I love talking with people. I just have so much fun doing it. I love telling stories. Interestingly, the people that I had lined up that are friends of mine to be on the podcast were all entrepreneurs. So then at the same time as I was starting to get ready to record those episodes, I got my first consulting client, and they were going through a accelerator program called Techstars, which if you know anything about the startup world, Techstars is a world-renowned startup accelerator in the part of startups. The fact that I got the opportunity to go through that is just incredible to me. It's like 3% of the businesses that apply to a Techstars program actually get accepted. So the fact that I just got to go through one was so cool because I learned so much about what is it that I want to do. And then my network has grown exponentially. And so it's evolved into this entrepreneurship podcast that a lot of the moments are round two moments, but they're like business moments. So they're people who are like, I'm tired of corporate. I have this idea. I'm going to go do it. And what's cool at this point is I have had people from all types of businesses, small businesses, local businesses that have been bought for multi-million dollars, people that are just starting out, all industries, and literally from all over the world. That's where we're at right now. It's evolving and growing, and it's truly so much fun.
And so you mentioned the reason why the podcast is called Round Two.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely want to jump into that, talk about that. And prior to that, I want to make sure we got all the information that is important. So you did the 15 weeks or so straight, then a hiatus because of life changes.
Yeah.
Then you brought it back, and now it is consistent every single week.
Every week.
At the same time, I noticed it was on the 24th, the 17th, the 10th, the 3rd,
yeah.
so on. So, couple things. What made you decide to make it consistent? Why is it important that the podcast publishes every 7 days and not every 10 days or whatnot?
I think for a couple of reasons. One, once a week was doable for me. It feels good. A lot of podcasts that I enjoy publish once a week. So I thought, okay, I can do once a week. That makes sense with the amount of interviews that I have that I need to do and to publish. Consistency, what we were talking about already. If you're consistent, I want to grow this. I want to grow my listener base. I want to grow my audience. I want people to keep wanting to come and talk to me and tell their stories. So I want anybody who's on it to go, okay, cool. Like I can look and I can see that she's been doing this consistently for the last 4 months, for a year, whenever they come along. And yeah, I feel like consistency proves your dedication also.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Pete, your listener trusts you.
Mm-hmm.
And also the podcast algorithm will trust you. If you do it minimum on a week at the same time, they're more likely to put you in front of people. That's really good. You said that the podcast changed and that you got your first client.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm wondering is when you first started the podcast and it was called Round Two,
mm-hmm.
was it about the same thing that it's about now? Because it almost sounds like it started becoming entrepreneurial with some of your friends that are guests, and now you have guests that are asking to be on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm curious if the basis of the show changed from when you started it a couple of years ago to where it is now as we're in the beginning of 2025.
Yeah, it certainly has changed. If you look back at my episodes from the first season, some of the most notable ones that were unintentional round twos, one of my guests, they got a knock on their door at midnight because the Santa Rosa fire was heading their direction. And they were basically like, you have 10 minutes to get out. And their house literally burned to the ground and they left with the clothes on their back. I had another friend of mine who was competing in a triathlon in Southern California, and he had a widowmaker heart attack and miraculously survived. Unfortunately, he's since passed on from another heart attack, but I'm so grateful that I was able to tell his story and have that preserved in time just for his family, his friends, and to anybody that is wanting to make a change in their life, because he had made some pretty drastic changes prior to deciding to do the triathlon. Yeah, certainly stories of entrepreneurship, they're very different. But I think at the core, there is similarity because it still is somebody choosing to make a change in their life by going from a corporate environment most of the time to working for themselves.
Yeah. So in the beginning, your thoughts never were, this is an entrepreneurship podcast. It's just a big change podcast.
Yeah, truly. And it just so happened that the people that I had lined up to record with at the beginning of this year were entrepreneurs. And I thought their stories were really cool because of either how their business evolved or why they decided to jump into entrepreneurship when they did. And then it started snowballing from there and really has taken on a life of its own.
One takeaway for the listener right now is that if you're an entrepreneur, what you do on your show can support and grow what you do when you serve people. You can help your avatar. I call that your perfect client. You can help your avatar on your show in multiple different ways, and that can translate into more business. Tell me if that's one of the reasons and how you're making that change. Is that one of the reasons why you're very active now and sounds like more committed to talking just more entrepreneurial stuff on the show lately?
I wouldn't say it's like the top priority. I love podcasting in and of itself. What has been so cool about it is all of the like amazing people that I have met and the way my network has grown as a result of doing the podcast and just the different people that have come my way. And then it's funny how it works. Again, going back to nothing happening overnight, it's people start coming your way. And then as they understand more about you, then it's, oh, like maybe there is some opportunity. So now I'm starting to see different types of opportunities starting to present themselves where it's like, oh, okay, like maybe we can work together from this perspective or that perspective. One of the things that I've also been putting my effort into right now is making sure I'm presenting myself out in the world all of the ways that I want to be seen so the right people can find me, whether it's the right people to be on my podcast, whether it's the right person who needs some type of freelance work that I'm an expert at, or whether it's a company that's looking to outsource coaching for some of their key players, making sure that I'm putting myself out there like that so they know that they can, so that they will come across.
Yeah. Me. And that's a big takeaway. I did real estate investing a long time ago. So I've been doing it for a while. I still have them. Don't get me wrong. But I was trained to be just full-time in that one thing. And this is like 2015. So 9-ish, 10-ish years ago from when we're recording. And somebody said something like that. You just said you need to put yourself out there. And they said you should be telling the person at the grocery store cashing you out. You should be telling the person in the elevator. You should be telling your friend, your family, your social media. You should let everybody know what you do, not in a aggressive, salesy, whatever way, but in a way, just this is what I do. You should know that if that's what you're looking for, if you have a friend, because that's how we make money. So you're putting yourself out there intentionally to make sure that can happen organically. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things that is a theme that runs in our family too is that we all, my dad, my brother, and myself especially, are very into connecting different people with different people. I love saying, oh my gosh, you should meet my friend so-and-so. Like that you guys would just totally hit it off. So things like that's one of the fun parts about just networking in general is that all these different people are now in my social sphere and professional sphere. So it's funny because I took a course in September. It was called Level Up on LinkedIn. And it was talking about how to start positioning yourself and getting yourself out there and not being afraid to post. And I wasn't afraid to post anything. I just was trying to more refine my niche. And so taking that course was really fun for me because not only did I meet more people, but I was like so excited to learn, oh my gosh, what is it that you're doing? Oh, wow. Like, how are you taking all of these little learnings from these roles and now you're off doing this? I don't know. I think I'm just now I'm like rambling, but I think the point is that if you can take the time to figure out exactly how you want to be perceived and how you want to be found, and you start putting yourself out there like that, then the right people will end up coming into your sphere.
That's so on point. Let's take a break. And before we do, I want to let the listener just know what we'll be talking about when we get back. The podcast, all of our podcasts can have a title and a tagline.
Yeah.
And it's possible that in our conversation right after we get back from this quick break, it's possible that we might make some changes on your podcast. We'll be right back.
Hey, my friend, as you know, this episode is sponsored by my company, growyourshow.com. We want you to be able to have the best tools at your disposal without costing you a whole arm and a leg. So right now you can get a free list of vetted equipment that like mics, mixers, webcams, sound treatment, editing software, everything that you need. I created the whole PDF with direct purchase links just to save you time and money, to help it be more convenient for you. So this free PDF will help you skip all the guesswork. If it's on there, it's vetted and approved by yours truly. And if it's not on there, it's probably not worth the money. So go ahead and get yours at growyourshow.com/PDF. Let's get back into the show.
We're back with Nikki Corbett from Corbett Consulting, as well as her podcast, Round 2 Podcast. And with that said, we're talking about, what does Round 2 mean? How do we know that this podcast is about entrepreneurship? How do we know who it's for? How will we know what to get out of it? The title is Round 2. And Nikki, let's talk a little bit about that. On this show, we've mentioned to our listener, not on this episode, but on the podcast on podcasting, we talk sometimes about how there's two ways to go about like a title and tagline. One way is being clear and concise, basically saying this is who it's for and this is what you're going to get.
Yep.
Or being creative and catchy, coming up with a name that means something to you, but it doesn't necessarily mean something to that other person until they like really understand it. For me, that's how I was with Round 2 in the beginning, because I was like, okay, what type of podcast is it? How do I know if it's for me? And I loved how you talked about how when you started the show, it was coming from a big change in your life after a divorce. And this was your Round 2, and it resonated really well with you. And you're using that name in the episodes. And I'm curious, how are you letting your listener know through the title and tagline? How are you letting that listener know this is for you? This is how I'm going to help you so they can find you easier?
That is a really great question. And now that you've asked that question in that way, I'm sitting here going, oh my gosh, like, how are they understanding that? The great news is that I have a very robust pipeline of people who have found me who are entrepreneurs. So that is awesome. However, when I'm thinking about my listener base, and if I'm a listener and I want to listen to podcasts about entrepreneurship, is mine going to come up when they type that in? And now I'm thinking, maybe not. So when we hang up from this, I am definitely going to make some changes because I do have a tagline. And that I think is what is making me smack my head a little bit, because my tagline is basically sharing stories of entrepreneurship, major pivots, and life-changing moments. So
Ooh, that would be so perfect.
It's like, why do I have that in there is what's killing me, because I'm like, it's on my Instagram, it's on my LinkedIn, it's on my website, but it's not like in my actual logo. So I think Canva and I are going to have a date later this afternoon.
Awesome. Lucky Canva, right?
Yeah.
All right, so let me ask you, when you're doing the title and tagline, would you consider making the title, subtitle, or title tagline both in the artwork and in the entire title? So the title itself has the keywords that are searchable,
right?
That say entrepreneur and the other things that say. Why don't you share the tagline one more time?
Sure. It says, sharing stories of entrepreneurship, major pivots, and life-changing moments.
That's really good.
Thank you.
That's really good. So yeah, would you consider putting all of that or some of that at least in the written title to get it keyword searchable?
Absolutely. It's actually funny. You have a podcast that the title caught my eye. I haven't listened to the whole thing yet, but it was talking about rebranding. And that's something that has been in the back of my mind. And I haven't thought more than just, is there a rebrand that would make sense at some point? But I'm absolutely going to include that tagline so it helps me become more searchable.
And you definitely want to be found by your person. There was another thing you mentioned before the break, and I've had it written down in front of me this entire time because I wanted to get to it. It's about guests.
Yeah.
You've mentioned once or twice about the guests on your podcast one thing was about them being your friend, and another thing was about them not being your friends anymore. They're reaching out to you, begging to be on your show. And I thought
Begging is a little much, but
not begging. I thought that would be something that we could bring up, because a lot of the people that listen to this show and a lot of the people that reach out to me after listening to the show, their big fear is, who the heck's going to want to be on my show? They might be saying that my show is brand new. I don't have a proof of concept. I don't know any big names. I only have a couple friends. So I want to hear more of your experience with guests in the beginning, guests in the middle, guests at the end. Were you ever worried about if you could even get a guest, like a lot of listeners are? Anyway, I gave you a ton. So I'm just going to throw it at you and say, tell us about your guesting experience.
Sure.
The beginning.
No, I love this question. And I also love that you asked 10 questions in one question, because I do that as well. And it just made me feel so seen. I'm like, oh, I'm not the only one that does this. Like, I had a guest on a few weeks ago and he was like, you just asked me like 5 questions at once. I'm like, I know, just start at the beginning.
Didn't you write them down?
Yeah. I'm like, aren't you listening? But yeah. So at the very beginning, when I came up with the idea, I did have a little bit of fear, because I was really reaching out to friends of mine saying, hey, I have this idea for a podcast. I think you have a cool story. I'd love to tell it. And at the time, because it was audio only, I was like, look, we'll just hop on Zoom, record it. I'm going to edit it. I don't do a ton of editing. At the beginning, I didn't do any editing at all, because we were just telling stories. So I just would throw it in GarageBand, make sure it sounded good, and boom, it was out. So yeah, did I have some friends who were a little hesitant, because they're like, oh my gosh, what's it going to be like? I'm like, it's going to feel like we're just sitting on FaceTime talking. And then once they got that, they were like, oh, okay, this isn't bad. This is fun. We're just talking. It's just being recorded. I did have some people who were a little hesitant and they wanted to listen to some episodes. And then once they heard them, they're like, oh, cool. That's great. Now with guests, especially when I'm having guests reach out to me, I do offer like a quick 15-minute, get to know you conversation, just because I do want to make sure that we have a nice vibe and we have a nice flow. Because I've definitely had moments where I've been recording an episode with somebody and I've written down, say, 5 to 10 questions. And I notice we get through all of those questions and I'll look at my time clock and I'm like, we've only been recording for 11 and a half minutes. Like, you got to think on the fly now, girl. So but then usually it ends up opening up and then it's, okay, we're good. We got this flow going.
Are these like yes or no questions? You're like, are you 15? Do you like cookies?
I know.
That would go quick.
It would go quick. And it is wild, because then it's sometimes I have someone like the episode you said you were listening to right when we joined the call.
Yeah.
That episode, and he had a hard stop. We could have probably gone for another 30 minutes. Like, that flew by so fast. We were both like, how are we already here? How are we wrapping up? So it is interesting how it all works. But I would say for anyone that is starting out, if you have a good idea, people do like to talk, and people like to talk about themselves. And guess what? We're all an expert in ourselves. So if you're asking somebody to tell a life story, if you're asking for them to talk about their business, if you're asking for them to, I don't know, maybe they want to tell about how they grew their family or how they met their spouse, or maybe what sport they played in high school, whatever it may be, like, people largely, if they're talking about themselves, like, they're an expert in that field. So it's not going to be, you're not like saying, hey, let's do quantum physics together on a podcast.
Okay. So these 15-minute conversations, how have they solved things? It sounds like I heard you say sometimes you just blow through 10 questions in a few minutes. There have been times that you've had these 15-minute conversations and you've been able to say, you're not a fit for my audience?
That hasn't happened yet. So if I am getting an inbound, I will research the person before I respond. I'll look at their website. I'll look at their LinkedIn. If I can find them on Instagram, I'll look at their Instagram, just because I want to get a feel for who they are, what kind of business it is, what they're looking to do. And I do want to go back to something, because you had mentioned your listeners thinking about, will somebody want to come and talk to me, or how do I ask people to do it? The first inbound that I got, I literally thought it was a scam email. I'm not exaggerating. Wow. I read it and I was like, what? Like, somebody from Singapore wants to be on my podcast? I was like, no, I'm like, this is a scam. And then I read it and then I researched the guy and I was like, whoa, this is legit. And it was just a cool moment. And I'm so thankful for however it was that they found me and that they wanted to come and talk on the show. So the 15-minute conversations, now I offer that as an option. I used to do it, and when I say used to, like in August, I used to do it exclusively, but now it's more of an option. So I let people decide. Some people are just like, nah, I'm cool, let's book it. I've listened to enough of your shows. Other people are like, yeah, sure, let's chat for 15 minutes. And I think it's like for them to feel a level of comfort with me as well is really what I'm more curious about. And sometimes we don't even end up talking too much about podcast stuff. We just end up chatting and like getting to know one another. I do try to save the good stuff for the podcast because sometimes those like initial question reactions, you can't capture that twice because if you've already asked me a question, I know that it's coming.
So for the listener who's a podcaster who's thinking about these 15-minute get to know you conversations for their guests that they haven't met before, what is a takeaway or two that the listener could implement to help them get to know that person on a better level for the show?
Just always do your research on the person. I think that's really important, especially nowadays, like with LinkedIn and with websites. If people are on shows, they're often putting clips of them up, or if you type in their name, it'll come up in YouTube. So you can see, what does this person sound like? What are they talking about? Do they seem like fun? Is it going to be something that aligns with what my show is about and with what my listeners are expecting to hear from me and my guests? So I think that's like kind of the biggest piece is don't feel like you have to respond just because an email arrives in our inbox. I know sometimes we're like, oh, I got to reply. No, do your research first and then respond. And you can be picky. If you don't think somebody is a good fit, I've definitely got inbound emails where I've responded after, and I always respond, but I've responded and I've thought I'll more push back. What are you hoping to get out of this? Have you been on any podcasts before? What is it that you're looking for? And interestingly enough, those people usually don't respond back.
Okay. So that means it's over. You don't have to stress about them anymore.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Good deal. From your journey, since I think it was 2022 that you first started the podcast, 2022. Over these last few years, what big takeaways do you have that you would perhaps share with yourself 3 years ago?
I would say when you have the idea and if it's something that excites you, just do it sooner. I wish I would have started this in 2018 because I could only imagine how much further along I would be at this point if I had started then. So I wish I had started then. And then I also think that the best thing you can do as you're going about this is join the Facebook groups, join the LinkedIn groups, join different groups so you can continue learning and getting better. Listen to yourself, ask questions, listen to yourself as you're talking to different people. It was funny. My dad was listening to one of my older episodes and he was like, I think that there was a point where your guest was just talking too much and it didn't really feel conversational. Oh, no. He was saying that your guest was talking and then he's like, oh, you stayed on a subject for too long. And I thought, okay, like I understand that, but I also like, I want my guests to shine when they're on my show. So if they want to tell a story, as long as we're not getting too far off topic, I'm okay with that piece of it. But I said to him, jump ahead a few months. I said, listen to this specific episode. And within the first 5 minutes, he walks back in the room. He's like, whoa, you've improved so much. And I'm like, thank you.
Yeah.
It's a work in progress. But you got to start.
I like that. And let's answer this question for the listener who's wondering, your experience is that you're way better today after 40 or 50 episodes than you were at 0 and 1 episodes.
Absolutely.
And I can say the same about me. Microscopically better. I grow slower than you over the last 1,200 episodes, but...
Yeah, well, I would imagine episode 1 to episode 100 to episode 1200, there's been some big leaps.
Yeah, now I just ask 10 questions, but before it'd be like 25 at a time. Okay. Yeah, so I'm getting down. I'm under half. It's hugely beneficial.
I bet.
But thinking for the listener who's considering starting a podcast, you work with a lot of startup businesses. Let's think of that startup podcaster. They've never done it. Should this intimidate them to be like, if I'm going to just think after 30 episodes that I was way bad 30 episodes ago, should I even start? How would they think through it? Or how should they think through it?
So I would say think through what is your topic and what is your goal with putting that topic out in the world? Who's going to benefit from listening to your show? I saw a TikTok not that long ago and it was a pretty large influencer and he was kidding but also not, saying, "Hey, just because like you think you and your buddy are funny on Sundays when you're sitting around watching football doesn't mean you guys need a podcast." And so it made me laugh, but I got his overall sentiment because it's like, who is going to listen to what you are putting out there? So what is your subject? What kind of value are you bringing? And what's the why? Like, why is somebody going to want to listen to your show? And then also reflect inward and like, why are you doing it? Do you want to have a podcast just because podcasting seems to be like cool right now? And there's nothing wrong with that being one of the reasons, but are you passionate about it? Is it something that you want to see grow? Is it something that you want to improve your skills with, right? Because it's not as easy as just getting somebody and recording with them, right? It's like you have to work on your listening skills. You have to work on your conversation skills. You have to, like you said, you went from 25 questions to 10. You have to work on your interview style and skills. So all of those things come into play. And then there's the little things that like, I know I didn't think about at the beginning: lighting, microphone, editing, all of that kind of stuff. Going back to what we said at the beginning earlier with fitness, it's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah. On your podcast, Nikki, this is only a 2-part question. So I'm getting better from the 10 already. What is your why and who are you helping through the show?
So my why is to help tell stories from people who maybe have a really fascinating story, but maybe they don't want to have a podcast. Maybe they are so busy that they don't have time to coach other people, but they have a lot of knowledgeable information, a lot of value that they can add. So by being on podcasts, they're able to impart that wisdom onto other people and help coach other people, but from just a different, like not a one-on-one perspective. So I always tell my guests, I want to make you shine. I want to tell your story. I want you to put yourself out there. And if you're trying to grow a business, if you're trying to grow your brand, let's work on doing that together. What was the second one? Oh, what was my personal? I would say anyone who's interested in business and entrepreneurship. I feel like that's a really broad answer though. But I do think that we are finally in this very cool day and age where entrepreneurship is so prevalent. You know what I mean? I think about when I was in college, like there was not a major in entrepreneurship. There wasn't even a minor. There wasn't even a class. So now that we have this world out there where you can literally go out and create a business, and it is encouraged and exciting to see people doing multiple things and wearing different hats. And maybe you have a really cool corporate 9-to-5, but you also are an influencer, or you also coach people, or also have a podcast, whatever it may be. There's that opportunity.
I have loved listening to that episode about cookies and franchising. And I've learned, I think I had only been at like the 17-minute mark when you and I jumped on. And I loved it. I thought there was a ton of value. And I want to just remind the listener that the link to your podcast is down in the show notes. All of the social media that Nikki wanted to share with you is down in the show notes as well. So you can connect with her there. Also, her website that she has is going to be down in the show notes. So just scroll down. You'll find all of that. You can connect with her and let her know that you found her here. Yeah. The next episode is likely a solo episode. It's usually shorter than this episode right now. So you probably have time to check it out. I'll see you there. It's going to be good content. See you there.
You know, I really don't say this nearly enough. I don't mention this, and I feel horrible because it's a great resource for you to be able to take your podcast to the next level. And it's simply a free resource that I don't need your email or anything. It's just a podcasting course that I created that is ended up putting in the very first 6 episodes of this podcast. So if you haven't checked it out, definitely going to want to just check out those first 6 episodes, see how they can help you improve your podcast, get in front of more people, and have a better result where you're making more money through the podcast, etc. So much can happen after you listen through episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So if you haven't done it, go do it now. And by the way, if you're subscribed, you'll keep hearing more great content. So to those of you who are, I'll see you on the next episode.